We're talking today with Tom Pack. Let's see. That was Wheatland, Missouri. Yes, make sure I get that one right. Interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project, and we're doing this interview at the 2015 Ripcord reunion. Okay, Tom, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1949, December 12th. I am from a large family of 9 kids, and when we were young, we moved to California for a few years, about 7 years, and then we returned to Kansas City, Kansas, where I finished my high school at Wyandotte High School.
Okay, and what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was a painting contractor, and so we moved quite a bit and moved around, followed work. But after we returned to Kansas City, Kansas, my parents did divorce, so I lived with my mother and younger siblings. My older brother joined the Navy right a year and a half before me, and then in June of '69, I was drafted.
All right. Now, when did you finish high school?
In 1967.
Okay.
I was graduated. I was one of the youngest in the graduating class, which I was only 17 just barely 17 when I graduated.
All right. And what did you do after high school?
I worked for a moving company for a short time, and then I went to work for Avon Products in the shipping department in Kansas City, Missouri, where I worked there till I was drafted, and of course I returned there after I got out of the service.
Okay. Now, how much did you know about the Vietnam War at the time you got drafted?
Not very much. You know, as a 19-year-old, and just knew it was not very popular, and there was a lot of people that weren't going, but you know, I felt when I got drafted, it was whatever happens, happens. So.
Okay. Now, do you know if your brother went and joined the Navy to stay ahead of the draft, or what he was thinking?
Yes, he did. He preferred not to, and he was actually in aircraft maintenance, and so on a carrier. So at one particular time, we both were in. He was on the outside of Vietnam when I was inside, but he went in before me, and I actually got out of the service before him.
Because he'd have to go in for a longer hitch in the
For
Navy
4
if he's
years.
enlisting. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So when do you get the draft notice then?
You know, I really don't remember exactly when I got it, but I do remember reporting. And my next door neighbor got drafted the same day, and when we were at the draft center taking our physicals, they told us to call off numbers, and every fourth number, they said step forward. He had to step forward, and they sent him to the Marine Corps, and I went to the Army.
Oh.
So from there, we went straight to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
All right. Now, when you were doing the physical, did there seem to be anybody there who was trying to beat the system or find a way out?
Not that I saw.
Okay. So then off to Fort Leonard Wood. All right. And then what kind of reception do you get down there?
Oh, you know, it was kind of, well, I'd had a warning. One of my best friends had gotten drafted about 6 months before me, so he told me all the little quirks and things, the pitfalls to watch for. So I managed to slide by a lot of details and stuff by knowing what was coming. But the 0 week was mainly just testing and details and that. And then at the end of that, they evaluated your test, and at that time they asked, you have a counselor, and they would ask you if you know what you wanted to do, and pick your field, and then if you would join, you could actually pick your field, or then I was offered a chance to go to OCS, which would have meant extending my time, and I said no, but they said, so I asked them what I did good on. They said, well, you did good on everything. You can just about pick what field you want to go into. So being coy, I said, well, I think I'd like to be a clerk. And they said, oh, you got a piece of cake. You got that. You had good scores and communication skills and all that. And so I went off to basic then. 8 weeks of basic, which was pretty much as everybody went through. And
yeah. Well, there actually are a lot of variations to it, so it does help to kind of go through it a little bit, or just to explain it to someone else who's not necessarily going to know. So what did the basic training really consist of?
Physical training, testing, There was a lot of class time. You know, we're learning mapping and different things, and then you learn, of course, you learn about weapons and how to take them apart, clean them, and put them back together, and a lot of marching and a lot of push-ups and
Yeah. Now, how much emphasis was there on discipline and spit and polish?
that was the main thing. You know, is learning to act as a unit, you know, in a group, march together, and being responsible for the guy next to you. If he messed up, you all were punished. So everybody, you know, you learn to get along and to work together as a team.
Okay. So you had a little bit of advice going in. Was it relatively easy for you to adjust to life in the Army?
It was pretty easy. I didn't have too many problems. In fact, you know, I learned early on that the best way to get along in the Army was to blend. And so, you know, being my name beginning with P, when they lined you up in alphabetical order, I was in the middle. So if they called from the end to the front, I was still in the middle. So I learned, like I say, blending was beneficial to getting by.
Did you have some guys in basic who really weren't getting by?
Yeah, well, we had a few. We had a few that weren't, as quite as sharp as the other ones. You know, some guys, and not everybody has the same mental capacity and stuff. And we had some very smart people in our unit that were actually, one was a professor. We had two that were teachers that got drafted just after they got out of college. And so we had a lot of intelligent people, and then there was a few younger kids that just weren't mature, and they struggled a little bit more. But on the whole, everybody helped each other to get by.
Okay. Now, were you in good shape when you went in?
Fair. I worked on a loading dock, so I was, you know, as far as strength goes, there wasn't any problem. Never was a fast runner, but I managed to get in under the wire and, you know, run the mile and stuff.
You have the endurance that
yes,
matters.
Yes, and it got stronger as time went on.
All right. Now, the people who were training you, did you have any idea what their backgrounds were?
Not really. No, just that they were in charge and you did what they said.
Okay. And when you were doing weapons training, did you get to see an M16 or was it just M14s?
We actually went in at a time we did both.
Okay.
And so we fired both of them. And I don't know if that later on that they changed, but we were actually at a time too where they were switching over from your Social Security number, from your Army U.S. number. Mm-hmm. So when we had to know both. And I think later years they just went to just strictly the Social Security number as your number. But.
Right. Okay. And then how long did basic training last?
8 weeks.
Okay, and then where do you go next?
We graduated, and that night we were on a bus to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and that's where we had our artillery training. We had a 0 week, as you might call it, where everybody was coming from different places and stuff till we formed a full company, and then the actual training started, and we were there 8 weeks.
All right, and what were you doing during those 8 weeks?
We were learning to fire a 105 howitzer, split trail. We learned every part of it. We could break them down, clean them, put them back together. We learned how to to set them up and just about everything.
Right. Now, how many men were supposed to be in a crew for that kind of gun?
I don't remember for basic because they just trained us all, but normally in Vietnam there were 7. So I'm not sure how many we really had.
Yeah, and how would the job break down at that point? Who does what?
Well, the gunner, he sets the direction, and the assistant gunner, he does the elevation and pulls the core of the lanyard, and then the number 1 man loads it, and the rest of us were ammo humpers.
All right. Now, did the ammunition come pre-assembled, or do you have to put it together?
No, it came in a box of 2 with no fuse, and you would break open the box, and it was in a fiber tube, and then you would pull it, take it out of the tube, and then you would add the fuse, depending on whether it's a PD fuse, which is point detonating, or a time fuse, which would be timed when it would go off. Each round had 7 charges in it, weighed about 47 or 49 pounds.
Okay.
And
But you couldn't adjust the charge. It was-
yes,
or
whenever,
you-
according to how far you're shooting,
Mhm.
the elevation, makes a difference. Plus also if it's 1 to 7 charges, if it's a certain distance and a certain elevation, you might pull out. They'll tell you charge 7, which we'd leave them all in there. If they charge 6, you'd pull 1 out, and it's on a string, long string, and you just put the projectile back into the canister, and then you break it off,
Okay.
and you would discard the powder that was left over.
So there was some assembly required.
Yes, but you left all of it together as you when you brought them to
Right.
your bunker and put them in there. And we mostly put PD fuses on everything right away, so they were ready to go.
Now, did you get any exposure to the other kinds of artillery that the U.S. had?
No, we never. I mean, I was around or saw the 155, but I never fired one or worked on one.
All right. And when you were doing the artillery training, would you get some time off? Could you go off base or anything like
I
that?
got a couple short weekends that took, and one of them I actually flew home from Lawton, Oklahoma, back up to Kansas City. It took 7 stopovers on a small plane, landing in every small town in Oklahoma and Kansas till I got there, and it took almost as long as driving in a car. So we flew back on a jet from Kansas City to Oklahoma City and took a bus down. It was a lot quicker coming home, but I was only home for about 24 hours.
But you just didn't go hang out in Lawton, Oklahoma.
Yeah, we could go into town, but I went in there once, but it wasn't, it was just a lot of drinking and partying, and we didn't have any money. I mean, what the PFC, a private first class made about $112 a month, and then by the time you took out for all your things that they charged you for laundry and whatever else, you didn't have much left over.
Now, were you a PFC already? Or
No, I was private
just
first
private?
class. The minute, as soon as you stepped foot on Vietnam, you were promoted to a PFC.
Yeah. So, but back there when you're in training, you're just an ordinary private at that
Private,
point.
that's right.
Yeah.
But,
And so paid even less.
yes, E1.
Okay, so yeah, it's pretty bad. All right. So we've got sort of the other. So when do you finish with the artillery training?
I'm trying. It would have been in the first week in October, because I had a 25-day leave from the time I finished artillery training at Fort Sill till I had to report to Oakland Army Base to go to Vietnam. So.
All right. Now, either in basic or in the artillery training, did they make any effort to tell you anything about Vietnam?
No, nothing at all.
All right. So now, you get to go home, and then you have to go out to
home for
Oakland.
25 days, and then, like I said, we reported to Oakland Army Base. Had orders to be there, and.
Now, how did your family feel about your going to Vietnam?
Well, of course, my mother was very nervous, and my sisters that lived at home, but I don't think they really grasped it a whole lot. I mean, my mother wrote me consistently, but I now, as most people, I think a lot of the guys do, when we wrote home to Mom, everything's great, the weather's hot, and send me some cookies.
Right. All right. So now you get out to Oakland, and what's the setup there?
There was a large building called, and I think it was 590. It was a huge Quonset hut. And once you went in there, it was almost like a prison. You didn't come back out. There was banks of telephone booths, so you could call home and all that kind of stuff. But you pretty much, that was where the processing was done, and they pretty much took all of our gear at that time and issued us some new stuff. But other than that, it was just processing and waiting.
Yeah. So how long did you spend there, do you think?
I think it was just a day. It was just overnight.
And then what sort of plane do you get on?
We got on a large 4-engine jet. I couldn't tell you what kind it is, but it was a commercial type jet with regular stewardesses. They didn't come around and offer you good meals or anything. I think we got some sack lunches, but we flew from Oakland to Hawaii, and we were allowed to get off the plane, but they kept us in a group, and it was in the middle of the night anyway. And then from Hawaii, we flew to Wake Island, and we landed on Wake Island for refueling, which was a real treat.
So did you do that during the day?
Yes, and when you land on Wake Island, well, I was on the wrong side of the plane, so as we came in, I saw nothing but water, and as it got lower and lower, and all I was seeing was water, and then all of a sudden I could see riprap, and the minute you saw riprap, the wheels hit the ground and they reversed the engines, and the plane came to a stop at the terminal. And they turned it around and took off the same way, but they really had to rev it to get it to take off. But it was, we got to get off there too, but of course Wake Island is not very big.
Yeah, nowhere to go there.
Yeah, there's no place to go.
All right. And then from Wake, where'd you land in Vietnam?
We landed in, I guess at Benoit. And that was an interesting thing, because you know, when we landed there, the plane, the jet was still a type of commercial large jet, but as it circled to come in, it had its nose up and one wing up, and it just kept tilted like this as it came in. And there was one guy on the plane that was going back, and I was like, what's going on? And he said, well, they do that so if they get rocket or mortar incoming while you were landing, that they can accelerate, because once they drop the nose down, it's too hard to accelerate these large jets to take off. So once they dropped down, they were committed to land. And I thought, oh no. and of course when we landed, and then when they opened the door of that plane, the humidity and the smell just is like the first time, it just is different. And I thought, really in for something now.
Can you characterize the smell?
I don't know. I would say musty, maybe even garbage, or I mean, it's just not it was just smell.
Yeah, because I've heard rotting vegetation.
Yeah,
and
that could be more so.
But decay of
yeah,
various
decay,
kinds.
Yeah, and it was very, very humid. And I mean, I come from the Midwest, and we have humidity, but this was real humid.
Right. Okay. Did you land during the day or at night?
Yeah, it was daytime.
Okay. And what happens when you land?
They met us and put us on a truck and took us to, I can't remember too much. They called it some kind of training. It might have been like P training or something, but we were there about a week, and they taught us ambush tactics and things like that, which being in artillery, we had no, I never, in fact, we hardly ever, as an artilleryman, we never fired our small arms or except in test fires and stuff.
Yeah. Did they try to teach you anything about Vietnamese culture or how to behave or anything like that?
Nope, nothing really. Just
okay. And at this point, did you have an assignment, or did you just?
No, I at that particular, I mean, I knew I was going to artillery.
Right.
But that's I was in artillery, but I had no clue where yet. Okay. And then when I did finally get some orders, I was the only person in that of all the guys that were there that was going to the 101st, and so it was. So I had to, what do I do? And they said, well, go to there's one barracks and give them your orders. And then there was a hop that went to up north to Phu Bai, and then we got there and told them where I wanted. And they said, well, they got a truck going out to Camp Evans, and so I got on the truck to Camp Evans. And then when I got out there, I asked them showed somebody my orders, and they told me where the headquarters was. And I mean, it was real kind of laid back, and I thought, I was by myself. I didn't, 19-year-old kid. I didn't know what was going on. But and when I found the battalion, headquarters, and I went in, they said, "Yeah, you're going to be on." Told me what battery I was going to be in, and I said, "Okay." When they told me how to get there, and so I walked out to the battery, and it was empty. And I walked there. I mean, the guns were no guns, no people or anything. So I went to the mess hall, and mess sergeant said, "Oh yeah, we're expecting you." He goes, we'll send you. And that day they put me on a chopper, or the next day, it was because it was late. The next day I got on a chopper and I went out with they would send out one hot meal a day. And I flew out with the mail and the food to the firebase where they were.
All right. Now for the record, which battery were you joining?
I was in Battery B, 2nd to 319th.
Okay, 2nd Battalion, 319th Field Artillery. Yeah. All right. and this is part of the 101st Airborne. And where were they when you joined them?
They were way up north, within about 6 miles of the DMZ.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, they said, okay, you're going to be on, gun number 1. And they assigned me, so the chief of section there, the gun, he said, okay, just stay out of the way. And I spent one night there, and the next day, here comes he says, march order. I said, well, what's march order? He said, we're going back to Evans. And that day, they broke down camp, and here come the Chinooks. And picked up our guns and us. They would land. We all got on the helicopter, and they picked up the guns and our ammo bag and hauled us back to Evans.
What does a gun crew have to do to prepare to move?
We would completely dismantle, break down everything. Sandbags had to be emptied. Everything completely put back like it was before we got there. So, unfortunately, they had done most of that before I got there. Mm-hmm. So it was really pretty much just load up and go. But all your basic ammo that was left that you had broke open stuff, they would put it in a net and then set it next to the gun. And then when they picked up the Chinook would hover over the gun and they would hook it, and then hook the ammo underneath it. So, and that's the way we traveled.
All right. Okay. So you have your brief moment in the field, and then there you are back at Evans again.
Back at Evans, right. And when we got back to Evans, got back there and we stayed for, I can't remember how long. All I remember, we were there for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And then we went. If I remember, I can't remember now whether we went either to Firebase Jack, but I know they sent us the next time we went out. We went to a Firebase O'Reilly, mm-hmm. and it was actually north, I believe, of Ripcord. Yeah. And it was in the monsoon season. Mm-hmm. And they took us in and dropped us off, and it started raining. And we, of course, being in the mountainous part of the area, we were in the clouds. And it rained, and we were socked in for at least 20, I think it was 21 to 24 days. And they couldn't resupply us. And we were running out. They had us quit shooting harassment fire because we were running out of ammo. Mm-hmm. And so we just kept basic. I don't know how many platoons or who was with us out there, because we never saw the infantry. We only saw the few that were around us. Mm-hmm. Most of them were out in the bush, and so I knew they were out there, but anyway, they said that. It was kind of like I say, being new and stuff, as what's going on, and they didn't tell you anything. You really, you just fired when they said to fire.
All right. Now that time out there on O'Reilly, when you're socked in, did you bring enough food with you that you were okay?
We were down to just eating C rations. We had enough C rations, but that we didn't get our hot meal. We didn't get mail. Sometimes they could get in with just a small chopper, but they couldn't. It was really hard to bring in, ammo and, mm-hmm. and stuff to us. So, towards the end, some general came in on a Huey, and it was starting to clear a little bit, and he brought us a couple big cases of steaks. When we just cooked them over an open fire, and that was the first real meat we had in weeks. It was, mm-hmm. But when they finally came and got us, the day that the clouds broke, it mm-hmm. was I've never seen anything quite like it. There were Chinooks everywhere, and they told us, march order, get ready, they're coming. And we had 30 minutes to get ready. And I mean, the clouds cleared enough, they picked us up and yanked us out. And mm-hmm. that, it was, and they said that there had been a lot of enemy movement in the area and on radar, but there, and so that was the only thing we had heard.
Okay. Had anyone probed your base while you were there, or shot at it?
No, not really. As I said, it was really pretty quiet, but it was, just eerie being, you felt like you were out there by yourself, they want to be, and then we went back to Evans for a short time, mm-hmm. and resupplied, got to take showers and that kind of stuff.
Now, do you think you spent a little bit of time at Jack before or after?
Well, I can't remember, but I know, but then we did go out to Firebase Jack, and we were there for Christmas, I remember that. And we must have been at Jack we were there a good, maybe 2 months. And of course, Firebase Jack is just about six or 8 miles outside of Camp Evans,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in the lowlands, the flatlands before you go to the mountains. So that was what they called a winter. I think a winter base because
Mm-hmm.
you know that way, or you know during the monsoon, because that way if there was bad weather, they can resupply you by truck if they have to. But we never really had any problem with that.
Okay. And was there much going on while you were at Jack?
Nothing really. You know, we never had any. We fired a lot. We fired a lot of harassment fire, H&Is every night, 100 rounds per gun, and we would just take turns. You know, get up, fire for an hour, fire 100 rounds, then go to bed. Then the next morning, get up and go out to the ammo dump and haul more rounds in. So, but that was pretty much the duration of the time I was there, though. H&Is was just pretty much standard.
Mm-hmm. Now, at this point, is there, you know, I guess, how long did it take you to feel like you were part of that gun crew?
Well, when I first went, the chief of section and the assistant gunner and the gunner, and there was one ammo humper, as you might want to call it, they pretty much were standoffish. Well, after one of them went home. I can't remember which one first. One of the gunner, the assistant gunner. Then the other one kind of got a little more friendly, but after they both left, then we were pretty much it. And then and I had two guys that came right after me. I was the first one to come in, and when I was by myself then. I mean, it was like. These guys, the other wouldn't even talk to me. You know, they new guys. They didn't even want them close by, and they had just come out of the Ashall Valley before I got there, and they had been through quite a bit the year before.
Yeah.
In the Tet of '68. So they were all getting ready to go home.
Or at least Hamburger Hill '69.
Yeah, pardon?
Well, that would have been '69.
Yeah, I guess it would have been '69.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's right. And they'd just come off of that, from you know, it'd been out in that. So they were kind of really ready to go home.
Yeah.
And as they called us cherries, they didn't want to be around us too much, or we might get them hurt. But once that, after about 2 months, I'd say they started, you know, things started leveling out, and the chief of section was real good about teaching us, and you know, keeping us, you know, learning about the gun, because you know we had just been we were trained on 105s with split trails. Well, they don't have any 105 split trails in Vietnam. They're called 10 deuces, and they got a large trails come around. There's a large wheel, and they can shoot in 360 degrees. You can just pick up the back of it and run around and point in a different direction. So that gave us a lot of versatility. Where the 155, you know, they had to point in different directions, and they only had a certain range, you know, but they can swing without having to dig your trails in and all that. Where we just had a base plate that was spiked to the ground. We could shoot in any direction.
Yeah, and it was a little bit lighter weapon, or it's a little bit smaller?
Yeah, smaller weapon. Yeah, the 105 versus the 155. So
yeah, but even the I guess in terms of the carriage for the 105 that you had as opposed to split trail, was it a little bit more compact in terms of how it was built?
Yeah.
All right. So you're there. Initially, there's not a whole lot going on. It's not too dangerous. Did Jack take any mortars or snipers?
We never took any incoming, nothing for the whole time we were there. So I mean, it was pretty much, all we were doing was fire support and harassment fire. So everything was happening more in the mountain. It was really pretty quiet.
Yeah. All right. And during the monsoon, they can't do that much in the mountains. So
right.
You're kind of that part of the year, not a whole lot going on. Okay. Now, where do you go after Jack?
That's when we went to Ripcord, and I don't remember if we went back to Evans or not at that particular time. It was pretty close, but it was in March, and we were one of the first ones out there. And this is the part I can't remember. No one had told me. I've asked a few of the guys here. When we first got to Jack, there was an Arvin 155 battery there. I know there was, because I remember there was a couple of I guess they're deserters that they had brought, that gotten caught, and they brought them back. Well, they had a big letter painted on the back of their shirts. I can't remember what it was now. Well, they'd come up and fill sandbags for us and things, for food, for leftover sea rations and stuff. And but I do remember. But then there wasn't, when we first got to Ripcord, it really, I mean, it wasn't a lot going on. I mean, you know, it was shooting, I mean, a lot of, we fired quite a bit and stuff, but, you know, it wasn't so bad in March or in April.
Well, I guess, they didn't actually secure the base until the middle of April. It's like
Right.
about April 11th, something like that, when they
Yeah.
actually go up
Yeah.
and stay up.
Yeah. So I can't remember the exact dates. That's what I'm saying. You know, I know we were one of the first, you know, batteries that went up there.
Right.
We were the first battery that went up there. But then, and we stayed the whole time.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, when you're going in, have engineers already created gun positions for you?
yes. Yeah. Yeah. They had already been in there and leveled the ground, and so when they brought us in, you know, they set our guns down, and where they set them down, we pretty much could roll them around on the wheels to get them set up a little bit and space them apart, but pretty much where they had it all lined out is where we sat.
Okay. And when you got in there, what did you have to do to prepare the position?
The first thing you do is, like I say, is you set your gun, you spike it down. You got 3-foot spikes in the base plate that you had to drive in all around, you know, to secure it, and then lay the gun. Get it. You know, every gun was laid in the exact same direction, and then set up our firing, you know, our devices, which are aiming sticks and our collimators and whatever it's called. Anyway, for the night shooting, and then we started filling sandbags, building bunkers. You know, I mean that was then what we dug for sandbags. A lot of times we used for foxholes. We dug our foxholes, filled the sandbags. Of course, we used all the ammo boxes. We'd break off take the lids off and fill them full of dirt to make sides for the ammo bunkers, and then we would lay these engineer rods across top and then start stacking sandbags and to protect the ammo that was actually close to the gun.
Mm-hmm. So you have an ammo bunker right by each gun position.
Right, correct.
All right. And then how quickly did you start shooting?
You know, I would say we probably, within a day we were shooting. You know, we were starting to shoot harassment fire.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, the harassment fire is, they basically, our fire direction center would plot out an area a grid or an area where there were no friendly troops, and and then we would just walk. They would have it pinpointed, give us our, you know, they just start calling us the locations and the elevations and stuff, and we'd start firing, and we'd shoot 2 guns at a time, and they'd just do that every night.
Right. And this was an area that didn't have any civilians in it.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, in the 101st, I saw very few civilians. Very few. There was a few that worked on Camp Evans, but most of the time I was in the north, I never saw any civilians.
Right. Okay. So you got in initially kind of April, May, early on during the Ripcord campaign. You're mostly just firing harassment. You're not getting regular fire missions very often.
Oh yeah, we would get fire missions. Don't you know? I mean, you know, once we got set up, I mean, you know, and I can't, you know, I couldn't tell you how many or what, but yeah, we would get fire missions. You know, I mean, you know, once you know the infantry's there and you know, those guys are, you know, calling us in if there's any movement or something, and yeah, we'd shoot fire missions all the time. Sometimes it would just be, depending on what it was. Sometimes it'd just be one. They just have 2 guns shoot. If it was really something where they, you know, they felt then they might have after they bring in 2 guns, that we'd, you know, mark it first and then start firing. 2 guns would fire till they got close to where they wanted, and then we'd do a battery, 3 rounds or 5 rounds or whatever they felt necessary. So yeah, no, we fired missions about every day. I mean, you know, it just depends.
Now, initially, was it fairly safe to walk around on the top of Ripcord and look around, or did you just stay in your gun position?
Oh no, we walked around. We never worried. In the beginning, I've got pictures of all of us guys sitting around with no shirts on and no hard hats. And towards the end, we were wearing flak jackets and steel pots. So you know, I mean, yeah, it changed as time went on.
Yeah. Now, sort of, who else did you see regularly up there? I mean, you'd have your own gun crew, other gun crews. Was it anyone else go through, or you were just on your own?
You know, the infantry was around. You know, sometimes they would, you know, they had the pathfinders that were there. They would, you know, they were for the hooking up the, you know, the loads and unload. You know, when the stuff come in and stuff, they were down below us a little bit. but we didn't mingle that much. You know, I never even went down. I mean, you know, with the 155s, where I don't think I ever went down there but a couple times, you know, for anything. You know, we were just pretty much, you know, doing our own thing.
Right.
We slept whenever you got a chance, and
Now, were they bringing hot food out, or were you
once a day. Once a day, they bring in big Mermite cans, and we get one hot meal in the afternoon. They bring that in the mail, and then the other 2 meals we ate sea rations.
All right. Now, as the campaign sort of proceeded, things got more complicated and difficult. At what point did you start to notice the routine changing?
Well, we were firing more, and then this is where I kind of have to interject. I started losing my hearing
Okay.
at this particular time, so they sent me out. I went out to the USS Repose and had my ears tested, and they came back with that I needed to stay away from loud noises. Well, when you're in artillery, it's really hard to stay away from loud noises. And so I came back, and so they said, okay. Somebody came up with the idea, since we were firing so much that one guy from each section went back to Evans, and we spent like 2 weeks. All we did was, for 12 hours, was break ammo out, put of the boxes, because there was no room for the boxes out there anymore, and just break them down and stack the fibers with the rounds in them in nets, and then we would do that at nighttime, because it was so darn hot in the daytime. We'd work 12 hours and then we'd sleep in the daytime, and we did that for about, I can't remember exactly how long. It might have been maybe 2 weeks, and then after about 2 weeks they said, well, we need you back in the field, so I went back. And
so when do you think you were at Evans, roughly, to do that?
it was in June, late June. So yeah, because I was out on Ripcord from the last part of June and up till July, and I was actually got orders, and I don't know if it was because of my ears or what, but I got orders to be transferred to a different unit down south on or about the 15th of July. So I was not there the last week.
Okay.
And I argued. I went down and talked to Captain Rich, and I said, why are you doing this? And he says, I'm not doing it. And he goes, I fought everything I can to keep you from having to go. But I remember going down and talking to him. I never talked to him but a couple times. He was the CO in charge of our battery, and he said that I can't stop it. And so I got on a helicopter. It took 3 choppers to get me out, though. They kept getting incoming, and I had to run to the pad. There were 2 pads, one up by us on the top and one down on the bottom by the 5.5s, and I had to run down there to catch a chopper down there, and it took 2 to get out down there. We were getting so much incoming.
Okay. Yeah. So by this time, because it's around the 1st of July is sort of when started getting more mortars coming in, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So you had an ugly couple of weeks in there.
Yeah, it seemed like we got more and more incoming, and then we were starting to get sniper fire. It was nothing like what the guys out off the Firebase were getting, but we were getting a lot more incoming, and they pretty much had it zeroed in. So we were doing, at that particular time, we were doing a lot of direct fire, which, we would drop our guns down to as low as we could and pull all the charges out but one, and just lob rounds at the hills. We would watch for smoke and for puffs wherever they were shooting from, and try to, it was just more of a guess game then.
So roughly what distance would these be from you?
I'm not good with distances now, but I'm saying less than a mile. We could see the hills, all the ones around us, and then we would sit and watch as the jets would come in and drop bombs on the hill across from us, and I'm confused which one it is. I kept thinking it was 805, and it might have been 902. I don't know, because everybody faced it kind of a different direction.
Yeah, because there was a lot of stuff went in at a certain point on July 8th or so on Hill 1000, which was a little bit higher than Ripcord was.
Yeah, and that might have been which one I was thinking of.
Yeah,
facing, because I know that that's where we were. The guns are more almost in a circle, not quite, but we faced that direction, and so that was one of our primary targets when we went to direct fire, because we could not shooting across somebody.
Yeah, and that just wasn't that far away.
Right,
So,
right. And we could actually watch where the rounds were hitting, so we could adjust. We could crank it up a little bit, move it a little bit to one side, so we could, kind of guess where we, just it's all guesswork at that particular point.
But you managed to get out sort of right before things really fell apart.
Yeah, I left right before it completely fell apart, and I got no news. I couldn't find out anything. I mean, I had friends, and in the gun section,
Yeah.
guys that you eat and sleep with for 6-7 months, and then all of a sudden, I was taken out, and I thought, well, and I could never. It took me. And in fact, I just made contact with one of them about a year ago for the first time to know whether he survived or not. I kept looking that maybe something happened, and so it really there was no. And once and I left, I had no way of communicating.
Yeah. Now, what unit did they send you to?
I went to the 5th. I think it was 5th Army, and I believe they were working out of Pain Inn, which was way down south. And when I got there, of course, I think with my hearing loss, they sent me to a gun section, but they didn't really need anybody, and it was a different world down there. They weren't firing.
You said 5th.
I think it's 8-5, 5th. I wasn't there very long.
Okay. There was another artillery battery?
Yes, I was sent to an artillery battery, and they. While I was there, I was in the field for about maybe a month on the guns, and then they said, "Well, we really don't need you out here. We've got and everything." So they sent me back to the rear and made me a truck driver. Well, the trucks were in the rear and the guns were in the field. So there was really I just pulled details and maintenance on a truck that wasn't being used for about a month, and I said, "This is boring." So I took R&R, and I went to Sydney, and then I realized there was a real world out there. And by then I'd been in country close to 11 months, I think. And so when I came back, I put in for a 7-day leave because I thought this is great. And they said no, that they were pulling out, and that whole unit was being deployed back to Benoit or Saigon and then Benoit to deactivate, and they were sending everybody home. And at that particular time, they looked at me and they said, "Well, you can't go home because you extended. So we're sending you to the 1st Cav." So here I showed up at the 1st Cav, and I walk in, and there was 2 other guys from different units too that got there the same day I did, and all of us I said, "Well, you only have 21 days or 28 days to go or something like that," and they didn't know what to do with us. So they came up with a brilliant idea. They made us gate guards at the division, or at the headquarters. So all we did was sit out at a little booth and open the gate and exclude officers for 8 hours a day, and so it was really a good, safe place to be here last month. But the southern part of Vietnam was completely different than the northern. They weren't doing anything. I mean, they weren't firing a lot. They seemed more at ease. And I thought, that's completely different war.
Yeah. Did you see more of the Vietnamese down there?
Yes, in the cities and stuff. And they had in my last month when I was in, and I couldn't tell you the name of the base I was on, can't remember, but they had a lot of civilian employees that would come. The women would come in and clean the bathrooms and hooches, and so every morning I had to check their little IDs as they came in, and the ones that came in, of course, I worked from 3 in the morning till 7, so there was not too many coming in then, and then I worked 3 in the afternoon till 7 at night as the guard, and we kind of broke it up that way so you didn't have to stand so long. But yeah, I would see the women would come in, and some men would work on the generators and fuel and stuff, just little things, but that's the first real time I've been around civilians, Vietnamese.
And in the South, did you have any issues with any kind of harassment fire or other stuff like that, or snipers?
No, nothing. I mean, it was like going to work at Procter & Gamble or someplace. I mean, it was, and it was also a little more spit and polish. They wanted you to be salute and stuff, which in northern Vietnam, the 101st was pretty laid back with that, you know. I mean, you called the officers sir, but you didn't salute, and you didn't, you know, wasn't a lot of spit and polish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where's your hard hat or your headgear or whatever, you know.
Did you get any occasion to go into any of the larger cities, or did you just stay out?
Only city I went to was Saigon, and that was when I was going on R&R, and there was a lot of people walking around. The Air Force, of course, a lot of the Air Force guys were down there. They had a PX that looked like a Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our PX is up on Evans was a Quonset hut and some canned shoestring potatoes and stuff like that. They had regular grocery stores and clothing stores and stuff. I mean, it was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just like being in the States almost.
All right. Now, are there any other just incidents or impressions that kind of stand out in your mind from the time in Vietnam?
Not really. I mean, you know, it all seemed to run together. It seemed like there was more time, that nothing was happening,
Mm-hmm.
but when something was happening, you know, it was, you know, it really would stand out. I mean, you know, it's like, but it was always short-lived. You know, I mean, you know, a mortar round come in or a few incoming rounds, and then it's over. It happens and it's done. You know, then you're cleaning up or, you know, or firing, and for a while. But then, you know, it seemed like our combat part was, for a while, was real short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, you know, you live on the edge all the time, you know, knowing that any minute there could be a fire, you know, there's a fire mission coming in, and you know, one thing, you know, you have to be accurate. You know, I mean, that's, too many lives at stake. But you know, it can get to the point where, you know, so many times when you're firing a firing mission, even, you know, you know, you pull the lanyard and you don't see the projectile, you hear it go boom, but you never see where it lands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 90% of the time, you know, you never see what you're shooting at.
Right. So you had that little base there in Ripcord when you did.
Yeah, but then the time on, the last couple, and I'm gonna say maybe 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of kept building and building, and until it seemed like it was intense all the time. And then, you know, then everybody was keeping their heads down. You know, you didn't just run around and you know, stand up.
All right. Now, when your time comes up, how do they get you back to the States?
It's really no big thing. I mean, you know, they just, you know, they give you your orders, and you get on a truck and you go to like Benoit, and you give them your orders, and they say, okay, you know, they process you. You get they always had the transit hooches for, you know, transit people, you know, by the different places. And I went to one place, and when I was leaving, and they were processing us, and said, okay, you know, the truck picked us up, took us to the airport, and you know, we were loaded on a plane and flew home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, coming home, we left in the middle of the night. It was in its 80s, and our first stop was Anchorage, Alaska, and it was December 14th,
Mm-hmm.
and it was cold, and we had no jackets,
Mm-hmm.
and of course you have to get off the plane and walk to the terminal, but it felt good.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cold, but it did feel good. And but then we went in from there to Oakland Army Base, and then there, they when you first come in, they checked your orders. They took our measurements because we were all wearing what I would say dirty, faded,
Mm-hmm.
stinking fatigues, and they told us all to take a shower. And when we got out, they had our brand new clothes already tailored, ready to go for us, and they just one set of Class A winter greens is what they gave us, you know, and they sewed all our patches on it and had our ribbons and everything already there, and you know, but you know, from your records and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and they had them on there, and they said, you know, hand you your orders, and you walk out the door, and that was it. There was no attaboys or welcome home or anything else. There was one sign over the hallway. I wish I had taken a picture of that darn thing, but it just said welcome home.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
So there wasn't any effort to get people to re-enlist or anything in this period?
No.
They were
It was just
downsizing.
that we were, and the thing that really was ironic is that a guy that I was drafted with, we went to basic training together, and then he went to the infantry, and I went to artillery. We both, but I think, I don't know if he went straight to Vietnam or if he extended like I did. I don't think he extended, but anyway, when I was standing sitting on my suitcase at a pavilion waiting for processing, I looked over and there he was sitting on his suitcase, and his name was John Krasinski, and I hollered at him, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going home." He said, "Me too." And we actually flew together from Vietnam to Oakland Army Base together. We processed together. We flew we got our same plane tickets to Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And we flew to Kansas City, and we took a cab. He dropped me off at home, and he went on out to his house about a mile and a half from where I lived. So I had somebody that I knew to go home with.
Right. Now, when you flew back home, did you do that in uniform or in civilian clothes?
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone say anything to you
Not
about?
a word.
Okay.
No, except for, there was a funny incident. When we got to Kansas City, we were getting off the plane. And of course, with all your ribbons, you look like you can tell you look like you've been in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You get a couple rows of, the different ribbons and the
Right.
service medals and all that stuff. And there was two guys that we had gone to basic training with, and they still were buck privates,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in their greens, and they saw us and they said, "Where you guys been?" Well, I said, "Well, we're coming home. We've been to Vietnam." I said, "Well, where you're going?" So, "Well, we're going to Nam." I said, "Well, what?" They both, I guess, had gotten, I don't know what happened, but we were getting out, and they were still, I don't know, they were just getting ready to go, and I guess they both had gotten some kind of trouble or something, and so they were just leaving when we were going home. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
but I was actually in the Army 18 months and 6 days.
All right. Now, what do you do once you get back home?
Well, that's the ironic part. You plan on that big surprise, that big day, and I walked into the house at 7 o'clock in the morning, and of course, I had 4 sisters living at home at the time, and the youngest ones, and my mom. And I walked in and surprised everybody because they didn't know I was coming home. I told them, I was supposed to get out January 9th,
Mm-hmm.
and I get home on the 15th of December. And so I walked in, of course, the big surprise, and then after that I thought, what now?
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about what I was going to do after that. I was so, it was just, getting at home, and I didn't have a plan. I had a job. In fact, I could have taken off a whole month, and I called them up and said, hey, I went back to work in January.
Mm-hmm.
Within, I think, I could have stayed off another 2 weeks or something, and I went back to work at my job. I just didn't know, didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you stay with that, or what else did you do?
Well, I worked for Avon Products in the shipping department.
Right.
I went back, and of course, I'd been there for, I think, a year and a half or so before, about a year and a half before I got drafted.
Yeah.
So I got all my seniority, and when I went back, I made a bunch of guys mad because I bumped them out of jobs and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I moved up really quick to one of the higher positions for men. And one of the top ones actually. And so I but I went back and just fell back into the groove, and of course while I was in Vietnam, after about 4 months, the girl I had been dating for a year or so beforehand, she had wrote me a Dear John about 4 months into Vietnam, so that didn't go home to any sweetheart or anything like that. It was just I knew my wife that I'm married to now, I knew her from high school, and we actually were reintroduced right after I got home, and we started dating, and I was married about in September of '71. So.
Did you have any problems readjusting to civilian life, or was it fairly...
At first I did. It was like, this is, after living in like we had, and then coming back and all, it just can't be real. I didn't get ice cream or, like when I did go out to the hospital ship, when I went out to have my ears tested, they had on the USS Repose, they had a little Dairy Queen like thing in there with chocolate bars, real Hershey bars, and I ate 2 or 3 of those, and I actually got sick, but that's beside the point. But Didn't have, getting back home, it was like, this is, it just took a while to adjust. And then I was jumpy for a while, New Year's Eve, the neighbor was shooting a gun and I quickly was under the table. And it took a while.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while to get back into the swing of things. But when I got home, I had this hearing loss and tendinitis, and so I fought that all my life, not being able to hear very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to school, I went back to school and had a little difficulty with that, with the hearing and stuff, and so my wife actually at the time we were married, she started going to some classes with me. She took the same classes, and every class she took with me, I got a good grade in, because she takes great notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I, just couldn't follow quick enough. And as time went on, I got better at it, and I started wearing hearing aids, and that my company provided, and they, that did help. And but I'm still in, about a little over 50% hearing loss in both ears, and it's mainly I have absolutely no high frequency hearing. In fact, that's how I figured out I didn't realize what I wasn't hearing. I was having trouble understanding the fire commands when twos and threes sounded alike when they would say them over the phone, and I was getting confused, thinking, and I had to have them repeat, and so one day I went back to the base camp and I was watching a movie, with the guys, and drinking beer, and there was in the movie there was some people sitting on a sofa, and one of them jumped up and ran to the door and opened it, and there was a guy standing there. I can't remember too much about the movie. I was having trouble hearing the dialogue anyway. It had gotten worse and worse. And I turned to one of the guys and I said, how'd they know he was at the door? I mean, not even thinking. And he looked at me and he said, well, you rang the doorbell. And that's the first time it dawned on me that I wasn't hearing something. Because, you don't know. You're out there in the field and stuff. And then it just seemed like it got worse and worse as time went on.
And then to look back at the time that you spent in the service, do you think you took anything positive out of it?
No, can't say that it was positive. I mean, I feel like I did my duty. I was called upon. I feel sometimes that I fought in probably one of the first wars that we ever lost. And they can say what they want, but we didn't win. And so it makes you kind of feel like it was that part was wasted.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I did what I was supposed to do. It was my responsibility, and I think that unfortunately now that I look back at the young people of today, I really think that the one thing that they miss out on is that they don't have any discipline. Mm-hmm. They were growing up in a society of you can't spank a kid. How if you've ever, when you're in the Army, when that drill sergeant says drop and give me 30, you didn't say, well, I don't want to do that. You dropped and gave him 30. You learn to take orders. You learn, and at the time you don't know why you're doing. You just think they're being mean. But after a while, you learn that you're learning to. When somebody says duck, you duck. You're learning to take orders. And everybody can't just think on their own out there. You have to think as a unit. And nowadays, I think that's what a lot of the kids are missing.
It would certainly make teaching college a lot easier if they did what you told them to do.
Well, yeah. And that's just it. I feel like, teachers nowadays are more babysitters than they are teachers. They spend more time trying to keep order in some of these schools and stuff. We need discipline. Everybody needs discipline. And I'm not a heavy-handed person or anything. I didn't beat my kids or anything, but my kids learned to mind. But nowadays, like I say, the military does help in that respect. Mm-hmm. I do believe it, and I don't think that the draft was a bad thing. The unfortunate thing is that I always felt like the really rich or the ones that could get out of it, because I can go to college, I can get out of the draft, and I can, you know, I don't have to because my daddy knows so and so, but so the average kid, he's the one that got drafted, and that's what I was. I was just the average kid, but that was our responsibility to our country.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story. So thanks for taking the time to share it today.
Okay.